Hey everyone, if you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button right now to join my channel for more. I was standing in the backyard of our little Midwest small town house, the scent of burned burgers and sunscreen hanging heavy in the air, as I watched my family crack up like I wasn't even present. It was one of those never-ending summer afternoons, the sort where fireflies would start twinkling soon, and the 4th of July barbecue was going strong. My mom, clutching her wine glass, her perfectly manicured nails glinting in the sun, turned my way with a smirk that sliced deeper than I'd ever confess. "Sienna," she announced loud enough for all to hear, "if you vanished tomorrow, nobody would even notice." The words hit me like a fist to the stomach, and the laughter that erupted after, my dad's absent-minded chuckle, my brother's cocky grin, my sister's piercing giggle, felt like a whole group backing her up. I plastered on a smile, lifted my half-eaten hot dog, and replied, "Challenge accepted." They figured I was kidding. I wasn't. I'm Sienna, 30 years old, a freelance photographer who spent a lifetime blending into the edges of my own family. That instant at the barbecue wasn't merely a mean poke. It was the last fracture in a base that had been eroding for years. As a kid, I was the middle child squeezed between my brother, a medical genius, and my sister, a legal powerhouse, in a family that gauged success by titles and bank balances. My love for photography ignited in high school when a teacher spotted my silent suffering and gave me a camera to capture it, got brushed off as a charming pastime. My dad, who'd once yearned to be a sculptor before choosing accounting, hardly glanced at my creations. My mom, brought up in a house where looks mattered most, would comment things like, "That's a bold choice, Sienna," her tone soaked in disapproval. My siblings were too wrapped up in their own triumphs to spot me. Only my grandma, who used to paint untamed landscapes in her younger days, recognized the spark in my lens. "You see the world differently," she'd say, her eyes resting on my prints. But even her affection couldn't silence the rest of the family's apathy. That barbecue, though, was different. My mom's words didn't just bite. They broke something deep inside me. I'd spent years striving to be noticed, hauling my portfolio to dinners, sharing my minor triumphs, like the time a local magazine showcased my images of deserted barns. Each attempt got fleeting looks or total rejection. My mom would say, already pivoting to my sister to rave about her newest courtroom victory. That night, as I drove home beneath a sky exploding with fireworks, my hands clenched the wheel so tightly my knuckles throbbed. I could still hear the laughter, sense the burden of invisibility. By the time I got to my cramped apartment, I realized I couldn't remain in a spot where I was just a shadow. I was finished pleading for their focus. I was going to vanish, and I was going to ensure they noticed. The choice hit at midnight. The apartment silence save for the fridge's hum, and the far-off pops of remaining fireworks. I paced the threadbare carpet, my heart racing with a blend of dread and resolve. My mom's voice rang in my mind. No one would even notice. It wasn't solely her words. It was the reality they held. The years of being ignored, my successes swept aside like crumbs. I tried it all. Therapy, setting limits, making myself speak at family meals, but nothing shifted. I was still the footnote, the one whose birthday they overlooked, whose calls they skipped. I dropped onto my couch, gazing at the quilt my grandma had stitched for me. Its patches a chart of her devotion. That's when I phoned Leah. Leah picked up, her voice sleepy but kind. "Sienna, you okay?" We connected years back at a community art fair. Two artists connecting over bargain coffee and visions of hitting it big. She is a writer, me with my camera. She was the sole person who'd always truly seen me, who'd cheered my little wins and heard my vents about my family. "I'm doing it, Leah," I said, my voice firm despite the turmoil in my chest. "I'm leaving. I'm going to disappear." There was a long silence, then a sigh. "Because of what your mom said." "It's not just that," I confessed, my throat clenching. "It's everything. Years of being invisible. I can't keep battling for a spot in a family that doesn't want me." We chatted until dawn, her voice a rescue line as I spilled a lifetime of pain. She tried offering other paths, confronting my family, taking a lengthy trip. But as I detailed the nonstop slights, The way my portfolio lay forgotten on the dining table, the way my dad once questioned when I'd get a real job. She began to get it. "Where will you go?" she asked at last. "Boulder, Colorado," I said, the name emerging almost on its own. I'd gone there once for a photography workshop. Enchanted by the city's peaks and lively art world, it seemed like a spot where I could breathe, where I could become someone fresh. "I've got savings," I told her. "I can sublet my place, work remotely. I just need a clean slate." By sunrise, we had a strategy. Leia would be my only tie to this existence, checking my mail, guarding my secret. I packed lightly. Clothes, camera equipment, my grandma's quilt, a few books, everything else, the secondhand furniture, the dishes I'd purchased to seem grown up, felt pointless. I headed to the bank, pulled out enough cash for several months, and got a bus ticket to Boulder. The toughest bit was the note. I scribbled a dozen versions, each too furious or too desperate. At last I went with "I need time away. I'm safe. Please don't look for me." I placed it on the counter beside my phone, a gadget that had only delivered voicemails of critique or quiet. I slipped a photo of my grandma into my bag, her smile a cue of the one person who'd always seen me. As the Uber drove off from my apartment, I didn't glance back. The load of my former life was already easing. The bus trip to Boulder lasted 2 days, a haze of roads and stops. My camera bag gripped firmly in my lap. I scarcely talked, just observed the world pass. Fields turning to mountains, my past receding with each mile. When I stepped off the bus, Boulder welcomed me with cool air and a light rain that felt like renewal. I checked into a budget motel, its neon sign blinking, and fell onto the bed, the truth of my actions overwhelming me. I'd abandoned it all. My family, my apartment, my former self. Fear nodded at me, murmuring that I'd flop, that I'd wind up slinking back to a family that didn't care. But under the fear burned a glimmer of something fresh, freedom. I needed work quickly. My savings wouldn't hold out forever, and I wasn't about to watch my dream collapse. On my second day, abrupt downpour drove me into a snug coffee shop named The Haven. The owner, Clara, a woman in her 50s with gentle eyes and a ready laugh, spotted my damp map and rental ads. "New to Boulder?" she asked, passing a latte over the counter. I nodded, wary. "Just starting over," she smiled like she'd known that tale before. "We all do sometimes. Need work while you settle." Just like that, I had a part-time gig pouring coffee. The flexible schedule ideal for reviving my photography business. Clara, I discovered, had her own tale of rebirth. She'd quit a spirit-draining corporate role to launch The Haven, chasing a life that felt true. Her kindness steadied me in those first weeks, as did the regulars who learned my name and tipped well. "Best latte yet," Sienna once said, and I held on to that tiny affirmation like a lifeline. In my spare time, I roamed Boulder with my camera, snapping the way sunlight played on the flat irons or the subtle grace of a street musician's hands. I launched a new Instagram unrelated to my old life and shared my images. To my surprise, locals followed, pulled by my novel take on their town. One follower, Miles, a graphic designer who'd left corporate drudgery for freelancing, messaged me about using a mountain image for a brewery label. We met at The Haven, chatted for hours, and he brought me to Tessa, a baker and single mom who provided the shop with scones. They turned into my first friends, welcoming me to art walks and potlucks where nobody quizzed why I wasn't a doctor or a lawyer. My neighbor Henry, a retired journalist mourning his partner's passing, became another supporter. Over Sunday coffee on his balcony, he'd recount tales of his reporting days. His insights on spotting beauty in the mundane reshaped how I viewed my work. I began hunting the unnoticed, a barista's precise pour, a child's chalk sketch on the sidewalk, and my photography turned crisper, braver. 3 months in, Clara proposed I hang my photos at The Haven. "That wall's begging for your work," she said. The little exhibit sold prints and ignited commissions, allowing me to reduce cafe shifts. But the true change was within me. Free from my family's nonstop judgment, I began relying on my gut. Therapy with Dr. Larson, suggested by Miles, aided me in untangling the years of doubt my family had planted in me. You were taught to feel small, she said. Your job now is to rewrite that story. I was starting to trust one could. 8 months after I vanished, my life in Boulder felt truly mine. My photography was picking up steam. My apartment above a bookstore bathed in morning glow. And my chosen family, Clara, Miles, Tessa, Henry, marked my every milestone. I was gearing up for my first big gallery show, Unseen Light, a series of photos seizing beauty in the daily. The gallery owner, struck by my Haven display, had called my work revolutionary. I invested all into it, picking prints, crafting descriptions, framing each with precision. The night of the opening, the gallery hummed with locals, my photos shining under gentle lights. I was mid-chat with a blogger when I spotted them. My mom entered first, her typical gloss faded, her eyes sweeping the space. My dad trailed, his tie a bit askew, gazing at my photos like they'd never crossed his path before. My brother and sister followed, seeming mismatched in their sleek outfits. And there was my grandma, propped on a cane, but bold as always, her gaze fixing on mine. My heart halted. The blogger's question trailed off as I excused myself, legs shaking as I crossed the room. A year of separation, of crafting a life without them. And here they were, bursting into my realm. I halted a few feet off, my vivid red dress, a daring pick I'd never have chosen in my old life, feeling like protection. Sienna, my mom said, her voice cracking. We found you. My grandma shoved forward, enveloping me in a hug that carried her familiar lavender scent. I knew you were out there shining, she murmured. The crowd around us hummed, oblivious to the tempest inside me. I yearned to flee to shield this life I'd created, but I also craved answers. How? I asked, my voice even despite the storm in my chest. My dad cleared his throat. We hired a private investigator, Evan. He traced your credit card, your new Instagram. Someone at the Haven recognized your photo. Clara, I thought, her warning text buried in my prep rush. My sister's eyes shimmered with something like remorse. Why, Sienna? Why did you leave us like that? The old me would have folded, apologized. But I wasn't her anymore. Because you made me feel invisible, I said loud enough for the room to hush. Mom said no one would notice if I disappeared. And you all laughed. So I left to find out who I could be without your judgment. The silence rang loud. My mom's face folded, tears flowing. I didn't mean it, Sienna. It was a stupid joke. It wasn't just that, I fired back, my voice hoarse. It was years of being dismissed. My work called a hobby. My life treated like it didn't matter. I had to leave to find myself. My brother winced, his usual poise vanished. We didn't know it was that bad, he said softly. My sister nodded, her voice tiny. I was jealous, Sienna. You always seemed so sure of yourself. The gallery owner neared, picking up the strain. But my grandma shooed her away. This is beautiful work, Sienna, she said, nodding to the photos. You've always been extraordinary. My dad, typically so guarded, chimed in. I was wrong to push you away. Your passion, it reminded me of what I gave up. The confessions washed over me like tides, each one breaching the barriers I'd raised. I wasn't set to forgive, not completely, but I glimpsed something fresh in their eyes. Regret, perhaps even admiration. As the crowd picked up their talk, I knew this was merely the beginning. I'd forge a life where I was seen, and they'd have to approach me on my conditions now. The gallery opening signaled a pivot, but it wasn't a fairy tale close. That night, alone in my apartment, encircled by my photos, I felt both spent and vibrant. I'd confronted my family, voiced my truth, and they'd seen me. Not the old Sienna, shrinking to match their hopes, but the woman I'd evolved into. The next morning, they showed up at my apartment, filling my tight space with uneasy vibes. We conversed for hours, stripping away strata of pain and miscommunication. My mom owned that her sharp ways stemmed from her own strict raising, where love linked to flawlessness. My dad revealed that my photography awakened his hidden sculpting dreams, making it simpler to ignore me than confront his regrets. My brother and sister admitted their roles, how their own stresses had blinded them to my suffering. My grandma, ever my rock, simply clasped my hand, her pride a silent force. I laid down rules. No more offhand cruelty. No more comparisons. Boulder's my home now, I told them. I'm open to rebuilding, but it has to be different. My mom nodded, tears in her eyes. We'll try, Sienna. We want you back in our lives. It wasn't flawless, but it was a beginning. Over the next year, we constructed something fresh. My mom rang weekly, inquiring about my work with real interest. My dad mailed me pics of his first awkward sculptures, a timid peace offering. My brother scaled back his hours, spurred by my bravery to value myself. My sister signed on with a pro bono legal squad, discovering meaning past status. My grandma dropped by often, her chuckles echoing in my apartment as she won over Clara and Miles. 2 years after that barbecue, I stood in my apartment clutching early copies of my photography book, Unseen Light. My family rolled into Boulder for the launch. Their company no longer a danger, but an enhancement to my life. Clara threw a party at the Haven where Miles, Tessa, and Henry raised glasses to my win. My mom lifted her glass, her voice firm, to Sienna, who taught us to see. I held back tears, not because I craved their nod, but because I'd shaped a life where I fit completely, genuinely. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Share your own stories in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your light. Keep shining because you deserve to be seen.